USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, January 17th, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger along with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Well, we have a brand new number one in today's USCHO.com Division I men's ice hockey poll, and that's Quinnipiac moving up ahead of Minnesota State, Michigan, also trailing behind there. While for the voters, and I think for us, it makes sense to see Quinnipiac at number one, does the fact that the PairWise has Quinnipiac fifth skew things at all? And let me point out that the thing that puts Quinnipiac in fifth is the RPI, and it's the strength of schedule in the RPI. They're 35th in that as they've played what is turning out this year to be kind of a weaker ECAC schedule.
You know what I think, Ed, that somehow does matter. And I look at, their schedule. They scheduled, the icebreaker tournament where they played Boston College and Northeastern off the top. And they probably thought, hey, those are a couple of good non-league games. And you have North Dakota in there. I mean, they probably, Rand Pecknold probably thought that he was scheduling a monster of a non-league schedule. But Boston College has had some trouble. North Dakota, decent season, but it's not a North Dakota-like season right now. They're kind of on the borderline of the tournament. Northeastern, even at this point, they're just above the Mendoza line getting into the tournament. I mean, these games have not paid off as much as they wanted them to. And it's a difficult thing. And then the ECAC in general, with a below 500 winning percentage out of conference, it's somewhere around 430. I don't have it up on my screen right now, but it's not as good as you need it to be. That conference as a whole hasn't done much. So when you look at who Quinnipiac has played in their league, Harvard this past weekend, that's a good game to get. But then Harvard, at the same time, I think they're now 8-5-1. It's strange. We're taking a snapshot of the season to this point. There are a lot of games to play for Quinnipiac, and I think that there can be games that really do boost that up if they play really well. You finish the season with just one loss, as they had that one loss to North Dakota. You're going to move yourself up in the PairWise. But at the same time, we have to take that snapshot as of today, and it doesn't feel like they have played the tough opponents, despite the fact that when you looked at their season before everything started, it looked like they had a really hard schedule.
I mean, as an outsider, as a coach, you always knew the polls are, and we always talked about this at the preseason polls and any type of polls, that it's just a whole bunch of people's opinion. It isn't what the computer is. And with that, I think that's where you see the difference between them being one right now on the poll compared to 5 in the PairWise. And it's no secret, Jimmy and Ed, we've talked about this from day one, that the DCAC was going to struggle in the PairWise right now. And I think that's, you brought up all the reasons. Not to take anything away from, Rand and that they've done there. You have to win your games, and they haven't had any slip-ups. So that's good for them. So, but I will say that the polls are a lot different than the only true poll that you get is at the end of the year when the champion is number one, because really it's everybody's opinion on a piece of paper, and everybody seems to be all over the map. But hopefully, for Quinnipiac's sake, they don't have the curse that's going on the number one that there has. So I think you're seeing the difference between the PairWise and the people's opinions right now, I guess.
Yeah, and Derek, you say it right about the poll. The same thing goes for the PairWise. Technically, the only day the PairWise matters is whatever the day is now, this March 18th or whenever they do selection show. That's the only day the PairWise matters. It doesn't matter right now, but it is a snapshot, and we as fans and we as journalists love to look at it and kind of see, where's my team? I fielded so many emails and messages from people this weekend about why my team didn't go up in the PairWise and why my team went down and we won a game. And people don't understand the PairWise, and that maybe that's why it's not the best tool to look at in January, even in February. It's a good barometer, and coaches, somewhat understand it. But I was talking to a head coach the other night. He didn't understand that if you play a game and win a game against a team that brings your PairWise down, brings your RPI down, they just disclude that game. He's like, so that's discluded for the rest of the season. I said, no, if that team goes back up at the end of the season, those games go back in. Like it's a really difficult computer tool to understand. And until, I don't even want to say until, nobody will fully understand this unless you study some sort of mathematics or really get into like a course on the PairWise, which is not taught at this point. But I'll tell you, USCHO University could probably just start teaching this course. It's very hard to understand, but does it give an accurate depiction of where teams are today? It probably does.
I got a guy. He also ran a thing called College Hockey Stats that you can apply, and we can get it all back on the whole mix. You know what? I agree with you, but I still think that right now it's a bunch of people's opinions of what the poll is.
The poll certainly is. I agree.
It's for amusement, and it's for, like you said, the media and the coaches and people involved to give people something to talk about. And because the 16th or the 15th seed in the polls, probably there's a pretty good chance that they might not get in the tournament. It's the way it is. So it's fun, and it's fun to talk about. It's fun to debate. It's fun to vote. It's fun. And that's why you're seeing passion of people emailing you and wanting those questions answered.
When we go down through and look at Quinnipiac's schedule, I don't think there's much that's going to help them in that area. Even the Connecticut Ice Tournament, which they have coming up at the end of the month, Sacred Heart, UConn, and Yale. Yale will not help them at all. Sacred Heart, probably not. UConn, maybe, but it's going to be tough. They're going to have to do it on winning percentage, and they've got to keep that number up there pretty high. The other thing in the poll this week, we saw Michigan starting to get some love and some first place votes after kind of getting a smackdown from the poll voters a couple of weeks ago after they didn't play Western Michigan in the GLI. Did some of that maybe wake up Michigan, or is it just getting everybody back, getting the bus back on the road? What's the story with the Wolverines?
Well, obviously, you've also got a little bit of sense of urgency, in my opinion. You're going to lose some players for the Olympics, and I think they've got to make hay while they've got it. And I think the players, there's something that said the players that are going to the Olympics feeling a little bit, I wouldn't say guilty, but they're gonna step their game up because they know they're going to leave their team in a little bit. In my opinion, I watched the game. I was in Detroit this weekend, and Fred Pletch did a great job on the broadcast on Friday, and actually on Saturday I watched the game, and they almost blew the lead there at the end of the game, but they look like they're firing. I mean, their power play didn't look as dominant as it had in the past, but they can get up and down the rink, and anytime you throw the decor that they have in the top four on the ice and go, and then you just go down the list of weapons they have. And Penn State did a good job coming back and put a little scare in them, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I look at this whole weekend, validating kind of what Derek just said, that I believe that Mel Pearson has kind of informed his guys, listen, we only have so much time, and you're going to lose Matty Beniers, you're going to lose Brendan Brisson, I assume you're going to lose Owen Power. You might have another player or two that heads to the Olympics. You don't know exactly. The U.S. roster is set, but there's other rosters. Canada, the number one, one to keep your eye on, is going to be set sometime this week. I think that there's an understanding that we're going to go through some times with some thin lineups here, over the month of February. Can it cost them the Big Ten regular season title? Possibly. But do they know that in March, hopefully these guys are back healthy and put them in a position for a national title? Absolutely. But I think Michigan understands right now, you're trying to get as high in the PairWise as you can, so that if you lose a few games here, you know, in the month of February, when you're missing a lot of really key players, you're still going to put yourself anywhere between, I'd say at worst 10 in the PairWise, but as high as maybe second or third in the PairWise. You'll take that, Michigan. You'll go to the tournament. And you'll be a really solid team that could dominate in the NCAA tournament.
I thought the Canada roster was announced the other day, was it not? I saw it online. Danny Heatley, guys like that. No?
I knew you'd get into this little spoof. Somebody did a good job. They spoofed. They threw a TSN logo on it. They made everybody believe Canada's lineup was announced. It had Owen Power in it. You know, that was you know, the slickness of it. It had Johnson too. Yeah, you're right. And but you know, Hockey Canada says the 27th is their deadline for announcing the roster. Hopefully, I think it'll be done this week. You know, we're at the 17th today. I think it's done by this Friday.
Well, how about turning to the NCHC? Boy, did they have to juggle things around a bit. And we talked about this on the Game of the Week podcast, Jim, but they've had to juggle things a lot. They called an audible. Omaha and Denver made up a previously postponed couple of games after the Omaha, North Dakota, and St. Cloud, Denver series were canceled. And all this was announced on Wednesday. So why don't we start with Derek on this? You're a coach and you've got to plan things. Your equipment people, your hockey operations people have got to plan everything. How hard is it to change gears on a Wednesday to play over the weekend?
Oh, it is, because obviously mentally you've started preparing. Usually in your practice, you've talked about the other opponent a little bit. It's no different than playing one team on Friday and then a different one on Saturday, where you got to change gears in a hurry, but logistically a nightmare for Omaha to have to change where they're going. Where a charter plane goes, so that really isn't that big of a deal. But you know, you got to get hotels. You may not be able to get in the same hotel that you really want to stay at. You know, you're with the way things are. The service industry, you might not be able to get into your favorite Thursday night meal place. There's just a lot of things that people take for granted in travel, and the hockey ops and the equipment staff, and they're all valuable members of your team, and you've got to make some changes on the go. And like I said, you may have already talked on by the time this happened about North Dakota's power play, and then you got to change gears to go to, I think, the big loser, and we'll talk, I think this is in your upcoming, I'm jumping script a little bit, but the big loser is Western Michigan in this. They've just had so much time off from not playing the game at the GLI to Michigan, and then having an off week, and then getting canceled this weekend, and have to dive right back into it next weekend. So it's a challenge, and I think you're going to see more of this than not. I know in the second half of the show today we'll talk about adding games and things like that, but it's not as easy as it sounds, especially taxing on athletic departments, league offices, getting referees in, selling tickets. Your home ice advantage might not be as good because you don't have the crowd that you would normally. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah, I really think that this is, we saw this in Hockey East last year, and on Tuesday they would announce a schedule for the upcoming weekend and hope to stick to it pending the fact that no further teams would get COVID. And I know that Steve Metcalf talked to me a lot about it. You know, the challenges they had. They would start the previous Saturday, kind of see where teams were, talk Sunday, talk Monday, talk Tuesday, and then on Tuesday they would finalize the schedule. That's not exactly where the NCHC is here, but they are definitely in a scrambling. We'll reschedule it once we realize on Monday that we have opponents that can't play one another. Can we get some other games together? I really applaud the fact that Omaha could hop on a plane and get to Denver this week. Not every school can do that. I think that is, something that you have to give a shout out, because that's not easy to do just from the start of, the basis of that. Charter flights, I'm sure, were involved and stuff like that. But at the same time, kind of to what Derek said, like, you prepare for something and you do a lot of work as a coaching staff for your pre-scout, and you get your X's and O's in order, and then all of a sudden it's changed. And that's difficult. I think that I think it's much easier to be the home team in these situations where you're not moving, you're not traveling, you're not trying to do something that's difficult to do, which is just hop on an airplane and move. I think that's, people don't understand, this is not the NHL. These aren't staffs that are just accustomed to just throwing everything on an airplane and being mobile all the time. That's one of the first steps. But I also look at it as, just as a player, your head's going one way and then you go a different direction. These guys just want to play. And that's, a real credit to any team that just can get on the ice right now. You just want to play. I get that. But whether you're playing or sitting out, the mental distractions that are going on right now are massive. And the teams that can overcome those distractions seem to be the teams that will be, the cream of the crop at the end of the season.
Well, when you look at preparation for that too, how much time do you spend during the week? How much time in practice and with video and things like power play and penalty kill and set plays off of faceoffs and all those kind of things, goalie tendencies? How much time do you spend on that? And how much do you have to shift gears at the last minute?
Well, you do. You spend Tuesday, depending if you practice Monday, but you do spend Tuesday working on some sort of special teams and mimicking what you potentially could see, whether it's how they forecheck. I mean, you may not get into personnel, but by the time they changed on Wednesday, there would have been discussions about North Dakota in some form, whether it's starting a pre-scout. Like Jimmy said, the staffs are affected more as far as starting to watch, because you watch 3 to 4 games of other teams leading up to that weekend. So they were probably already done with their North Dakota preparations, and then to have to pull in and then switch to Denver pretty quickly. But I think you're going to see this more often than not. I think it was Brad Schlossman that said, I think this is a perfect NCHC job. They did a great job. It's a perfect schedule until Monday of next week.
Speaking of special teams, Denver and Omaha in the rescheduled series, 20 penalties between the two teams on Sunday, a total of 36 on the weekend. But the sweep boosted the Pioneers to third in the PairWise, and they're now in first place in the NCHC. I've been pretty high on Denver all season. Are they now the best team in that league?
Kind of, in my opinion, I think sleepy. I mean, you haven't heard a lot about them in the circles that I run, and maybe because I'm more Midwestern, Eastern part of the Midwest, but you don't that they're really good. They're going to be there, but as far as nationally, they're kind of, in my opinion, sleepily hanging around, and then boom, they're there, because everybody talks about the North Dakota. Everybody talked about Western Michigan. Everybody was talking about Omaha's start. In my opinion, at least, I know that you've been very high on them, Ed, and Jimmy, you're even farther east. It just kind of snuck up on you a little bit. Next thing you know, they're in first place and they're in the PairWise. Hats off to them to be able to do that, because it's maybe the time change. I don't know, being behind and things like that, but they snuck up on me, that's for sure.
Well, I will tell you that I think Denver perennially was always on my radar focus, because, as a guy that sits home on Friday and Saturday night and you wait to edit the front page of USCHO and you sit there and say, we got to wait for the Denver game. We got to wait. And last year easily eliminated that. They didn't play well in the pod, and you say, okay, well, we maybe we don't have to wait on Denver. And then Denver had a good second half run, but they still didn't have enough to make it. And you said, Denver, whatever. And maybe I even had lost them on my radar screen and on my large scale radar screen. And listen, they are back, and they're back with an abundance now. Third in the PairWise, they're in great position right now, and yet another sweep of a weekend. They're on the top of the NCHC standings. I know there's games in hand for North Dakota. I don't want to get their fans, too much of their underwear in a bunch. But we know that there is going to be a race down the stretch, but wow, I love the way this team's playing. And I guess this was the Denver team I expected last year that didn't maybe come to fruition until late in the season, and then it was too late. They've done it kind of right out of the gate here. They've beat some really good teams out of conference, and then in the conference, they've been really solid. And I think that's what really gives them the credence. Is if you're the top team in the NCHC, you're a darn good hockey team.
People aren't talking about Magnus Krona in the national scene for the Richter and things like that. And his numbers are really not up there, but he's got a 13-4-1 record and a couple of shutouts. He's getting the job done for the Pioneers.
Well, I think with any goaltender in the NCHC, you've got a league that scores more goals than on average. So you're not going to have a ton of NCHC goaltenders that look like, a Dryden McKay or a Yanni Peretz or, even Devin Levi, Owen Savory, those guys, I don't want to say that Hockey East doesn't score goals, but NCHC scores a lot of goals. So you can be one of the best goaltenders in that league and still have a goals against average around, high 1, 1.8, 1.9 or low 2s and still be unbelievable. So you got to remember that I just think the offensive game is a little different in that league.
And you guys told me we weren't going to talk about the Richter this week, and then we go out and throw the R word in there. I mean, we go to Richter right off the bat. Richter this, Richter that. I thought this was going to be a Dryden McKay free episode.
Well, it is no longer a Dryden McKay free episode. That's all you guys talk about is McKay. I can't help it.
You're not the ones getting the emails. I am.
Well, let's move on to the last item in this first segment, and that's Arizona State. If we didn't have them declared dead for the NCAA, we at least had them on life support last Monday when they were 12-12 after being swept by BU. But then they added a game against Northeastern, won that handily 6-2, and then had 2-1 and 5-1 victories at RIT. So now they stand at 15-12. They are a bit outside the bubble in the NCAA in the PairWise, although they've got that weekend coming up at the end of the month against Minnesota State. They are now back in the conversation after being almost given up for being out of it.
Yeah, and I had a chance to talk to Greg Powers a little bit this morning over text, and I said that right before he texted me, I said I just typed into our game our rundown for our podcast. I said that you're the team that won't die. He said, "Hell yeah, we won't die." He's like, "We're ready to go." He's like, we talked about it after the BU series that we're now in our postseason and there's not a lot of room, and he understands that they probably. Maybe they could lose or tie a game or lose an OT game to Minnesota State, but there's no room for losses anymore. They got 3 this week, 3 wins this week, the Northeastern, the 2 RITs. They're going to play Lindenwood this week. That doesn't count. But then they're going to play Minnesota State twice. And then they have 4 against Alaska, 2 against LIU. You can't lose any of those games. Those are non-negotiables. You have to win all 6 of those games. 4 against Alaska, 2 at home, 2 on the road. 2 against LIU, I believe, at home. But the 2 games are Minnesota State. It's now, though, that becomes, if any other team in the country gets to play a conference tournament, the Minnesota State games are like a 2-game total goal mini series, what we used to have in the 80s and 90s for the NCAA tournament. Those 2 games, they have to take at least a win and a tie away. If they do that, though, I believe 22 becomes somewhere closer to 12, 13 in the PairWise. You win those 6 against Alaska, 4 against Alaska, 2 against LIU. They have a path. I'm a Boston sports radio fan, and we talk about the path in Boston all the time. It's usually whether the Patriots can make the playoffs, especially in the last 2 years. So I'm all about the path, and I feel like that is the path that Arizona State can take. But it starts that I think it's the 28th and 29th against Minnesota State on the road. You have to come out of there with a win and a tie, or your season's probably over.
I think actually Arizona State and might have the most research this week because, I know Greg fairly well. My daughter and his daughter are defense partners. So I was texting him a little bit this weekend about our kids' games. But, I think they've known where their scenario is. I'm not 100% sure they will be playing Lindenwood this weekend. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. It's irrelevant. The only way it's relevant is if they potentially get another game somewhere along the line, those games do count in your 36. So I think in talking with, they've always been very bullish on this team, that this was their best team. And Thursday, he told me after their Thursday or Tuesday game against Northeastern, it might have been the best game they played as a Division I program. And that says a lot because they did have a team that won a lot of games and went to the NCAA tournament. So a couple of years ago. So I think that they know that they've got to, at very worst, get a split. I mean, maybe a win in tie might be where it is, but at very worst, a split when they play Mankato, and then they've got to win the 6 against Long Island and Fairbanks, without a doubt. Maybe 7-1, but I was the one last week that said they're dead. Their bubbles burst, and they came back with a vengeance.
You brought up an interesting point. They've now got 35 varsity games on their schedule, and if the Lindenwood games count against that total, they could only play one. So that sounds like maybe that's why you're saying these might not happen.
It might not because of, I think, a whole bunch of different scenarios with all their travel and things like that they had to deal with. They were on the road for a long time.
I also think the Lindenwood games don't count toward their schedule, but the 2 Alaska games, aren't they exempt? The 2 games up in Alaska?
Well, they are.
That's how they get to 36.
Right. But Lindenwood is on top of 8 remaining NCAA games, 2 with Minnesota State, 4 with Alaska, 2 with LIU, and right now they've played 27 games. So they've got 35 scheduled against NCAA teams.
Yeah, that puts them at 35, I think. So,
yeah, but bookmark that in your mind for later in the podcast. We're going to take a break now and come back with more of it. Remember that there's a game available for Arizona State, and think about those implications. We'll talk about that when we return. This is the Weekend Review podcast brought to you by Digital Federal Credit Union. That's DCU. Visit them at dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Welcome back to Weekend Review for January 17th, 2022. Let's play a little buy or sell. We've done this a couple times this season. Buy or sell that these teams will make the NCAA tournament. And I'm going to mention where they stand in the PairWise right now. Providence got swept home and home by Merrimack. They stand number 18 in the PairWise. Buy or sell?
I'm still buying. I think that they're going to be a better team. I don't know what happened this weekend. Merrimack's a good team, but I think that Providence can get there. They will get there.
I'm selling. I'm not. I think you're only going to see a few teams from the East in this tournament. I think you're going to only see 5-6 tops. I think they're going to be on the outside of the bubble.
I'm going to sell also. I think Hockey East is going to have a lean year in the NCAA tournament. Minnesota, they lost Jack LaFontaine. They're going to lose players to the Olympics, but they're number 12 in the PairWise. Buy or sell for the postseason?
As I would be a buy if LaFontaine is in net. I'm a sell right now. Too many question marks, inexperienced goaltending, plus losing a lot of guys for the Olympics.
I'm sell. This is only on at large. Listen, I think that when they get those guys back in March, maybe they get the auto bid, but we're talking about at-large bids. I'm selling right now. I think that the missing players in the month of February will really decimate this Minnesota team.
I agree with Jimmy on that sell. A number 12 in the pairwise can very easily become a 14 or a 15 quickly. Cornell, they're number 13 right now. Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell because of what we talked about earlier, the ECAC. I think if Quinnipiac runs a table and wins out, there may only be a one bid ECAC, maybe.
I'm going to buy. I think that Cornell will be the second ECAC team in. They can get in on the at-large, even if they don't win the tournament. They will win enough games in the second half to take themselves from, say, 13 right now. They're going to be up around 10, maybe even 9. By the time we get to March 1st, there'll be a team that might lock themselves in before the ECAC tournament even begins.
I'm not as optimistic as Jim, but if I had to decide, which I do, I guess, I'm going to say buy. I think that their sweep over North Dakota is going to pay off for them in the pairwise down the road. Arizona State, we talked a lot about the Sun Devils. They stand at number 22. They have got to get it done against Minnesota State. Are we buying or selling on Arizona State right now?
Oh, gosh, guys. I feel like I'm negative. I'm selling everybody this weekend. I'm like a flea market.
You've sold out.
I'm a flea market. I'm a flea market. I just think it's too difficult of a task to play the schedule as is right now, and go 7-1, especially with having to go to Mankato and going to Alaska. And Alaska proved that they're no pushover with beat Minnesota. So I'm selling on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, believe it or not, I'm going to sell on this too. I've been really bullish on Arizona State all year. I just think that the task is too tall because I think it's 7-0-1. I don't think it's even 7-1, Derek. I think that they can't even lose a game here for the rest of the season. I think that they're a good team. And I know that Greg Powers can scheme for one entire weekend, but I don't know if he can do it for 2 straight nights because this is a Minnesota State team that has one of the best goaltenders in the nation.
I'm going to buy with this caveat. I think they end up somehow going 8-1. I think they add a game somewhere along the line that gets them over the top.
Oh, okay.
And we're going to talk about that in a moment. Let's look at Notre Dame. They are right on the line. They would be out of the tournament right now at number 16. Buy or sell the Fighting Irish?
Oof, I'm going to buy. I think that they are good enough and that they will not, they'll have some splits, but I think splits in the Big Ten will keep them somewhere around 15, 14, 13. They'll get a sweep somewhere, probably a weekend series that they're going to, do okay in, that they'll take at least 5 or 6 points. And then I also think that they'll probably advance in their conference tournament, get to the semifinals, and they'll be in a position that they're going to get in. I'm going to buy.
Gosh, if I don't buy here, I'll have no teams in the tournament. It would be an 8-team tournament. So I'm going to buy. And basically, there's got to be, and my reasoning is there's got to be somebody left to go into the tournament. And I think the Big Ten will, like you said, Jimmy, will help them out tremendously.
I'm going to buy Notre Dame, and I think it's because they are going to benefit from Michigan and Minnesota having players away in the Olympics.
Good point. Real good point.
That'll be enough to give them a notch up. Let's take a look. We got 2 more on the list. Harvard. Now, Jim, when we talked to Rand Pecknold at Quinnipiac last week for the Game of the Week podcast, he said that Harvard has maybe the 3rd most talented team in the country, yet the Crimson are at number 25, and it's going to be tough for them, like we talked about in the ECAC and also with the 29-game schedule. Buy or sell on Harvard?
I'm going to go sell, and it's because of just go listen to what I said about Cornell earlier.
I will sell for a different reason. I think that I thought that the Bean Pot could help them, a couple of non-conference games, maybe, playing BC and Northeastern or something like that in the Bean Pot and getting 2 wins. It would be a stretch. They have won the Bean Pot since 1989, but, this is a pretty good Harvard team. That said, I don't even think that those wins can help them enough. I'm not sure what wins in the ECAC are going to do at this point. That's a big question mark that, if a team were go 10-0 from here on out in the ECAC and get to the conference finals and lose, would they have enough wins at that point that would boost their RPI? Maybe. You're talking about Harvard's played one of the smallest sample sizes, maybe the smallest sample size in the country, I think, with 14 games played thus far. They have a lot more games left, 13 games left, plus postseason. Are those enough? I still don't know that it's enough. I'm still going to sell.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's too bad. In one of these days, they got to let the Ivies play 34 games. Last one on our list, Boston University, 7 games in a row, unbeaten, but they're still sitting at number 27 in the PairWise buy or sell on the Terriers.
I sold a whole bunch of times on them every time we've done this. I think they're the perennial, they're like a baseball card that you just keep getting back when you've traded it with your friends. You keep trading them and getting them back. and you give, hey, I'm going to give you the 3 for this one. And then somehow you end up back in another deal. You keep bringing them back into the mix. And I just think 27 is a big number, but 7 in a row is put them back in the conversation. I would be more inclined to say sell, but I'm not too far off on buying.
Before Christmas time, I think they were 44 in the PairWise. They're now 27. Does that help? Yes. Do I think that they can get in? I would if I didn't know that Drew Commesso was going to the Olympics. And that is the one that kills me. They're going to lose their number 1 goaltender for 4 weeks at least. That is the only reason I'm selling. I think this BU team is going to be in a position to possibly get into top 4 in Hockey East. Maybe they make a run. And when Comesso's back in the tournament, maybe they win the darn Hockey East tournament because they can actually go on a huge postseason run. They're playing really well. They're healthy for the first time, but I still have to sell on an at-large bid.
Can I buy one team? I want to buy one team that's not on the list. I want to buy the Yellow Jackets of AIC. I know that they've taken a little bit of a run here to the. I mean, as far as an at-large potentially, they've climbed to. They're right around 20. If they went on a massive run and then somehow lost in their tournament 1 game, I still think they might be close because of a big win there against UConn the other day.
The only thing that makes me concerned with them is that their strength of schedule is going to go downward as they play a league schedule the rest of the way out. So that may impact that. But I think Eric's got a great team there in Springfield. And I was going to say on BU's point, I'm with Jim on that. I think BU might not be the only team that doesn't make the postseason because of the Olympics. I think we put Minnesota in that category too. And I don't think that's going to be an impact on Michigan, but it's not going to help. And maybe it moves you from a 1 seed to a 2 or a 2 to a 3 by missing some players along the way. One last item that does impact PairWise that is an interesting one that Derek brought up to us as we were planning the program. And that's the idea that with some games canceled that can't be made up, you may find teams when it comes to the end of the season who have been bounced from their league playoffs may find a way to schedule a game with another team such that it would help the both of them, or at least one of them if they win, but it has the potential to help both of them make it into the postseason. How likely is this to happen, Derek?
Well, I mean, it's been talked about, and so much to when I brought it up, Jimmy's actually heard it before. And I just got confirmation that Lindenwood and Arizona State are not playing this weekend. So they do have a game. So it's been brought up that there's going to be some potential teams that could see this as an advantage. Let's just say, and we've all seen that team that's 17th before that loses in their first round of their tournament or gets upset, and they're just sitting there waiting and they're hoping and blah, blah, blah. Well, if they had a game canceled and they're 1 short, and there's a team that's at 19 or a team that's at 14, and there's the ability to add that game as long as it occurs before Selection Sunday, before the certain amount of time. I think it's 2 p.m. that they have to have everything in there. It was 2 p.m. last year, and they can end up playing a team. There could be a team willing to get up get into a plane, get on a bus, go to a different place, play for a bonus point on the road to try to help them get into the NCAA tournament. It's not too far-fetched, especially with, as you see changes and people that could potentially have the ability to fly places and to charter planes, that it could happen. And just don't be surprised if it does. Let's put it that way. Am I 100% sure it'll happen? I'm not, but don't be surprised if it does.
And if we just look at the teams we had on the list for buy or sell, take a Providence at 18 or a Notre Dame at 16, if they were bounced and had room on their schedule, those would be the kind of teams that a team like Arizona State might look toward to pick up a game.
And you see with cancellations, I mean, teams are canceling non-conference games, not making them up. Cornell, other teams like that, I don't be surprised if it happens. That's all I have to say. Jimmy, you talk to people out east about it. What are your sources?
Yeah, I do have a lot of people I've talked to have said, why would we do it? And they maybe don't understand, didn't see it as clearly when we're having the conversation. And then I said, well, what if you're 16 and somebody else is 17 and you know that you're both going to miss the tournament, but you've both been eliminated before your conference semifinals. Could you play a game on the Friday of the semifinals, at somebody's home rink? And they said, oh, geez, I never really thought about that. So it's not that coaches just aren't always thinking about this because you set your schedule. You don't worry about that. My other thought, Derek, is kind of what just happened with Arizona State. They were on a long road trip. They were playing Boston University one weekend. They were playing RIT the next, and Northeastern had lost a game and had an open Tuesday night and said, sure, come in on Tuesday night, we'll play you. For Northeastern, maybe they'll regret that at the end of the season, especially if they miss the tournament, on the bubble. But Arizona State, they got the win, and that was a good win for them. And it helped them pass a lot of road time, which is horrible. You don't want to be on the road for 15 days only playing 4 games. They play a 5th game in there. They have less practices. They get to enjoy some more things as a team in terms of accomplishments. I think that you might see that every now and again, especially in these bus leagues. I don't think you're going to see it a lot in the NCHC. Maybe you might, where maybe I don't even know who has games open right now where there were non-league games canceled. But I know that UMass Lowell had some games canceled against. Could they pick up a game against another team that had something canceled along the way? I don't know where every other team's schedule stands. But if Lowell could play an AIC, for example, would they do that? Maybe, just to solidify your position. Maybe you're a team that's, in mid-February, you have a weekend open. You just want to do something. Or maybe you have a Friday, especially the Hockey East teams where you play Friday, Beanpot week, and then most teams have Saturday off because, BCBU and Northeastern are playing on Monday. And then the same thing happens the next week. And that's Saturday before the 2 Beanpots are usually open for schools. It's tight planning, but if you can add games right now, it doesn't seem like anybody is persuading for or against adding games, and the NCAA will allow it. Just go ahead and do it.
I'm going to throw a scenario at you, and I know that we're getting to the end of the show here, and Ed, I'm sure you got your opinion, but let's just I brought up AIC there. Eric's always played people. If they get a league game canceled, let's just say they were going to Niagara, and they get a league game canceled towards the end, and they don't have any way of making those games up, but they're able to play that weekend, and a Hockey East team gets canceled. Say a Providence, say a Cornell, that are teams that need those wins. What's to say that AIC and them, they don't play a game and just get a game done, and that helps both teams. And you go and you play for it, basically. You're playing off for it.
And AIC would be an outstanding team for somebody from another league to play against, because that's somebody who, by the end of the season, probably would help your strength of schedule and help your PairWise. So the Yellow Jackets could pick up something. Heck, maybe a charter plane from Tempe to Springfield to pick up a game could even happen. Who knows?
It's fun to talk about, though, isn't it?
It is. And we'll certainly keep an eye on that. And as we get to the end of the season, we'll see how people's schedules look. But we're going to wrap things up right there. It's been a fun episode of Weekend Review, and it's been brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.